Allan Hamilton started as a janitor and eventually went on to graduate from Harvard Medical School and complete his neurosurgical residency training at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Hamilton currently holds 4 professorships at the University of Arizona. He is the tenured professor of neurology, as well as professorships in radiation oncology, psychology, and electrical and computer engineering. In 2019, Dr. Hamilton was inducted as Regents Professor of Surgery. Dr. Hamilton has held positions as both the chief of the Division of Neurosurgery and chairman of the Department of Surgery at the University of Arizona, and is also a decorated Army officer who served in Operation Desert Storm. An author of more than 20 medical textbook chapters, nearly 100 peer-reviewed research articles, and has served on the editorial board of several medical journals, and for the last several years, he has served as the senior medical script consultant for the television series Grey's Anatomy, along with 4 seasons of the television show Private Practice. He continues to consult in Hollywood and most recently worked as a consultant for Peter Berg's movie Patriot Day. In this edition of the Cowboy Up podcast, Dr. Hamilton explains how the practice of neurosurgery, patients with terminal diseases, artificial intelligence, and horses align on this week's Cowboy Up podcast. Welcome to the Cowboy Up podcast. This is where talk is all about the West, the spirit of the West, and especially the people and the personalities that make up the West. This is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and Cowboy Spirit Radio Productions. Okay, so Russell, I think we're getting to your time of year. It's starting to get warm out there. It's not getting horribly warm, but it cools down at night. But I know you like it warmer as opposed to colder.
May's my favorite month, and I'm laughing, and Dr. Hamilton may be too, I don't know, but we're Arizonans, we're Tucsonans, and people are, oh, it's so hot, and it's not even, it's barely warm.
Well, we first off, we train every child, first words they ever say is, but it's a dry heat. Okay, and secondly, it's hot. It's getting hotter. I used to train horses from basically October through April, but then it started to get too warm. I'd do it earlier in the day, and finally I just said, April's kind of up for grabs whether it's going to be a cool month or not. It used to be it was really dependable. You really wouldn't have to get rid of your jacket till May.
Yeah.
But now it's this is really one of the big existential questions, that we all face, which is, lands and landscapes that we love are threatened. I used to read about people traveling on horseback between Tucson and Phoenix.
Right.
And I go, well, you'd drop dead if you tried to ride between Tucson and Phoenix. Well, it turned out there were, ponds and tanks of water, and once upon a time there was even a Sonoran beaver that became extinct. But there was that much groundwater that you could easily walk from here to Phoenix and water your horse, and to get water faithfully. I wouldn't want to volunteer for that mission right now.
No, I don't think it was ever an easy trip.
No.
And then the destination back in those old days, meaning Phoenix, with its lower altitude, higher humidity, that's why it populated later. Tucson was cooler and drier, so I think we'll embrace what we have here.
Absolutely. Before we get too much farther, I would like to introduce our guest.
Yes, please.
We are thrilled to have Dr. Allan Hamilton. He's currently the executive director of the Arizona Simulation Technology and Education Center. He is, if I go through everything, we'll be here till tomorrow. He's a graduate of Harvard Medical School. He did his neurosurgery residency at Mass General. He holds 4 professorships at the U of A in neurosurgery, radiation oncology, psychology, and electrical and computer engineering, and he's the chief of the Division of Neurosurgery and the chairman of the Department of Surgery. How am I doing so far, Doctor?
Oh, okay. Except I'm already going.
Nah, and here's one that'll wake everybody up if they snoozed off, and that's that you consult in Hollywood. Everybody loves Hollywood in the movies, and
Yep.
you are a senior script consultant for Grey's Anatomy for several years. You were, and 4 seasons with TV's Private Practice, and if that doesn't wake them up, you're an Army officer who served in Operation Desert Storm, and chosen as one of America's best doctors 20 consecutive years. That's a pretty high title. And then what our people are going to love to hear is you work with horses and humans and combine that.
And I love that. That's the spiritual side of my life. I've had a ranch for many years. I had to give it up a few years ago. It was just too much physical work, and I had some lung problems. And they said, if you keep plowing pastures, you're not going to have any lungs left. But my grandfather raised me. My grandfather was a really good equestrian. Basically, the two of us would run off every free moment we got to do something with horses. And then, I was a camp counselor, and I actually moved out west because it was just too expensive to have horses back east. And I preferred getting out west where there was more land and it was easier to roam, and got a great fondness for quarter horses. But I also raised Lipizzan for dressage. And so it's I don't care about what kind of horse it is. I just care that it's a horse. It's just, to me, they're amazing creatures that are basically trying to tell us to take a listen, and you'll hear the universe speaking to you if you're quiet enough.
Well, you're talking to a dude rancher, so people ask me, well, what kind of horses do you like? And I said, I like dude horses. And
Yeah.
and that's, that could be an Arabian or a quarter horse, or most
Absolutely.
likely a grade horse or draft or thoroughbreds, or name them, we got them. Off topic, can I ask you, did you know Bob Coate?
Yes.
'Cause
In fact, I talked several times over at his outfit, and then I talked in front of the
Dude Ranchers.
He invited me to talk to the annual convention of dude ranchers.
Right, I was there, and I remember that very, very well. And
that's great to hear.
And several of the things you said I took away and remembered to this day. I'll mention one really quickly, and correct me obviously if my memory has faded over these years, but you were talking about horses as you just did, and their connection with humanity, and then also the idea that some really good therapeutic effects can happen working with horses. But you talked about, if I remember correctly, that it was really important that the people who do that facilitation, that therapy, be properly trained, that not just somebody who thinks they've got a good way with people and really should be a therapist shouldn't be doing this. It should be people properly educated and prepared, and then combine it with horses, which narrows that field a little bit, and then you can really help people. Is that a fair synopsis?
Well, you're going to get an A on the paper. Now, I think the thing is that I've grown up. I've been married for 50 years to a clinical psychologist who's the daughter of a clinical psychologist and the mother of a clinical psychologist. And you wake up in my family and you're going to run into clinical psychologists and lawyers. But you really get appreciation for the absolute best combination is a good horseman or woman, horse professional, who's going to make sure that people are safe and the horses are safe and the horses are well handled. And a therapist who's really just watching things and looking for these telltale signs, because everything with a horse is nonverbal, and especially with, adolescents who aren't exactly forthcoming in their conversation, you can have a wonderful session just watching them work with horses and looking at their style and looking at what they're concerned about and looking at what they're afraid of failing at or what they're succeeding at or didn't expect to succeed at. And a good friend of mine named Wayne Ewing made a beautiful documentary about basically people saving horses and horses saving people, which was called Playing with Magic. And in that, he focuses on a whole bunch of horse people, myself working with cancer patients. But, if you think about it, if a person's out there in a round pen and you want a metaphor for something big and powerful and potentially overpowering that you're trying to connect with and have a relationship with, a therapeutic relationship, it's a beautiful metaphor for, hey, how am I going to get comfortable with this notion that I've got to fight cancer? And the answer is going to be, using the same tools and the same techniques of, I'm not going to let the power of this overwhelm me. I'm going to create a therapeutic relationship out of it that's going to give me the strength that I'm going to need to fight this. And so, horses are, my mom was a big churchgoer. I was an altar boy, but I just never followed up. But she used to always want me to come to church, and she'd swing by the ranch, and I'd be there, in my chaps and stuff, and she'd go, you don't look ready for church. And I said, oh, already been to church. I was in the round pen with the horses, or in the arena with the horses. I found plenty of holy, sacred stuff out there. Thanks. So that's for me. That's been sort of the, as people say, well, you're brain surgeon and you're using all this high tech, very computerized stuff, and I look at that and say, yeah, that's the left hemisphere of my brain, but the right hemisphere, the artistic one, the one that's connected to nature, that one uses horses. And that one connects right away with horses, and I get real quiet. I think if you think about all the different spiritual practices, like people chanting and humming and drumming and singing and all of those, you say, well, what do they do? They're all designed to shut the left hemisphere down, which is the language hemisphere. And they do it so that you can create communion with everything around you, with powers that are greater than you are. And so with a nonverbal horse, it's a great way to say, hey, left hemisphere, why don't you shut up and listen for a minute and connect. So
and so are we inferring correctly that shut up left hemisphere is important, that's a healthy thing for people?
Yeah. We're constantly think about that monkey brain that's running around, the voices. You did this right, you forgot that, you didn't get the groceries, you forgot it's constant. It's constantly talking. And it basically, because the left hemisphere is the language hemisphere. So the right hemisphere doesn't get it's mute. But that's the hemisphere that reaches out and connects and feels the bond with things. And so by taking that left hemisphere and asking it to quiet that voice down, that's what allows you to suddenly reach out of yourself and say, let me feel connected to the energy around me.
Wow. Now, I will tell you, Russell, I had what I anticipated to be about a 5-minute get acquainted call with Dr. Hamilton before we did the podcast, which was my agreement with him. And I felt bad when we were done with the call because it lasted 45 minutes.
Oh, my.
And I was absolutely lost in everything he had to say because it's so relatable. And especially when I look at what Dr. Hamilton has done and what his wife, now that we've learned as a clinical psychologist, is doing. And I relate that back to what they do at base camp. And this is all a variant of the same thing. It's about shutting the left side of the brain off and just connecting with the right side of the brain. Right. Is that a fair statement, Doctor?
Say that again.
Okay, is just basically shutting the left side of the brain off and just getting in touch with the right side of the brain and communicating using that. Is that a fair way of stating what you're talking about?
Absolutely, and it's so therapeutic. If you think about meditation, think about chanting, drumming, making, the circular bowls, singing music in church. If you think about all of those practices, those are all right hemisphere practices. Okay, and basically it's the method that we use to say, how do I get into a spiritual state of mind? And the answer is, I've got to quiet my left hemisphere so I can connect. And then, that's my definition of spirituality. People say, well, what do you mean? I said, everybody has this drive to connect to something bigger than themselves. I don't care whether it's religion, their community, their family, nature, their awe of nature. But I said, everybody has this innate feeling of, I must be connected and meaningful to something bigger than just me.
Well, one of my life theories, and it may make you chuckle, I don't know, but what you just said relates to that, makes me very mindful of this. And one of my beliefs is that if you don't believe there's something bigger than you, and whether that's the church, your church, or it's Mother Nature, or it's whatever, the spirit that runs through the chanting, whatever it is, if you don't believe that, then you either decide, you extract from that either the false theory that you're bigger and more important than you are, or you extract the opposite theory, which to me is equally destructive, which is you're less than what you are. But if you don't have that sort of proper placement, from my perspective, of course, that there's something bigger than you, then you're lost.
I agree, and I think there's I just got a new book out called Cerebral Entanglements, and in there's part of a chapter called Nature Deficit Syndrome, which is really about the fact that our kids are indoors. Our kids are indoors playing computer games and on their cell phones and on their social media, and they're not outside communing with nature. They're not outside communing with animals. That's one of the great gifts when you're on horseback is every animal in the forest goes, oh, that's not just a human, that's a human on horseback. We're okay. And all of a sudden you see all the wildlife around you. You see the coyotes and the bobcats and the deer and all the rest of that. And, you understand how immersed you are in everything. I had a friend of mine who was a Native American poet named Pipestem, and he was out at the ranch, staying out at the ranch, and he wrote a beautiful poem about a hawk. And she said, oh, I'd like to read you my poem. I said, okay, great. We started walking, and we started reading the poem. And I stopped him. I said, Pipestem, don't look right now, but right overhead, there's a hawk. And he looked at me and he said, of course there is. I wrote a poem about him. And it just showed me that he had this sense of being immersed in everything he did, was immersed in the world around him, in the natural world around him, connected energetically. And I was the idiot going, hey, don't look now, but there's a hawk flying overhead. So it was just a reminder that I find one of the great things about indigenous peoples is they've had that connection for thousands and thousands of years, and a big smile comes to their face, and they go, "No kidding, you're connected." They literally say, "You're a child of the earth. You're a child of the planet. You're a child of nature, and you belong to it." And it's when I think about things like global warming and the problems we have now with species going extinct, I go, those are all the Creator's gifts, and we owe them the respect and the love of life that is extended to us by those animals and those species, and we need to save them. We need to do the right thing, which is respect life in every form we see it. And, I think that's one of the great joys of being on horseback is you get out in nature and you say, this is what it is. It's not, it's not driving down a highway or pulling off on the shoulder. It's getting so far away. It's just you and your horse and the animals around you. And you have that sense of, I'm going back in time. I'm really traveling back in time to a time when people roamed the earth like this on horseback.
Right. Well, as a dude rancher, I've said too many times on the Cowboy Up podcast that there's no better way to see country than from the back of a horse, because you get a little elevation. You're not watching where your feet are landing. You get to be far more a part of it. Hiking's wonderful, but if you don't pay attention, you're going to fall down. And so you need to get up on a horse, and I agree. I think you're more part of it. But we've gone over time. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Dr. Allan. We're off to a great show, I can already tell. This is Stan. I'm the guy with the Cowboy Spirit radio guy, and it's my privilege and my pleasure, as I said, to bring you this program, and we thank you very much for being a growing and going membership, and we thank you for being here and for recommending us to others. What we have discovered is that more and more people are doing exactly what Russell and Stephen are doing, and Dr. Allan. They're telling their story and trying to demonstrate things that will be helpful and useful to people, not by sending a brochure, not by putting out a flyer, but by being on a radio or video program. It's called personal performance marketing or business performance marketing, and the podcasting, the YouTube and video platforms, that's where it's at. So right now, if you and your business, you want to go and grow, you need to discover a little bit about the podcasting, the publishing, and the video production. And it doesn't have to be very expensive. It just has to be something that you have a passion for and you're willing to do a little investment and a little learning. And you can be, as someone once said, a bit of a radio and television star for your good cause and for your business. And we want to help you. So check out witradio.net, What It Takes Radio, witradio.net, or drop me a line. I would love to visit with you and give you a demonstration of what we can do for you. So reach out to me at Stan, S-T-A-N, real simple, Stan at witradio.net, Stan at witradio.net. Who knows, before the end of the year, you might be on the radio. You might be telling your story worldwide and not only making a little bit more money, but having a lot more fun. Till we talk, till next time, bye for now.
You were talking about nature and getting out in it, and I was on an advisory committee for a company that I think very sadly didn't make it. It was a startup company. It was going to be an Airbnb model selling travel specifically and only to nature-based destinations, which would include farm stays, dude ranches, cabins in the woods, oceanside. Yep. And, for this or that reason, it's hard to get those things. But they had a brilliant model. And they also had a lot of data. They had a lot of studies that talked about the gap in humanity because of self-isolation from nature, and I think I said that in a little cumbersome manner, but just we weren't giving ourselves enough exposure to nature, and that it was really critical for mental health and physical health, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what do you think? You said it.
I think we didn't evolve to just worry about broadband, and cell coverage. I think that there's a whole interesting set of experiments that have been done with nature and healing. And so they had this one group of patients. I'll just tell you quickly about this experiment. One group of patients operated by the same operating team. Okay. And they all had the same surgery. It was gallbladder surgery. Okay. And one group of patients got to look out the window and there was a tree. And the other group of patients got to look out and there was nothing but a brick courtyard. Okay. And the group that could look out the window at the tree had fewer complications, less pain requirements, and got out of the hospital faster. Just seeing a tree is a connection. Okay. And I think you're absolutely right that we're doing a big experiment. Okay. Which is our kids are exposed to a lot of social media. They're exposed to a lot of first-person shooter games. They're exposed to a lot of pornography at a time when their brains really are developing I always think back that, kids from 4-H that I helped, or a lot of the horse shows where I was a judge and that sort of thing. I see those kids and they work their butts off, taking care of their animals and competing. And they're healthy kids with good work ethics. And they understand that hard work is required before something pays off. And I look at them and I go, they're the ones who've got the gifted lifestyle. It's the ones who are locked up in an apartment, and their choices between TV and computer game or their cell phone. And I go out to restaurants. I'm sure this happens to you. I go out to restaurants and I'm looking at couples, and the entire time they're on their cell phones. They're sitting across the table from each other, and they don't even talk to each other.
I see it here. It shouldn't happen.
You just go, this is no way to relate to people. And the other thing is, there was a huge, the biggest, longest experiment ever done was an experiment at Harvard Medical School where they followed a group of people from 1939 onwards. And they've now followed them, their children, their grandchildren. It's still going. And they looked at, they'd examine them every year. They'd look at their goals. They'd look at their psychology, what was important, what was, that and that sort of thing. And there's a guy named George Fallon who ran the study for years. And at one point, he was in front of reporters reporting on the results again at 50 years. And they said, of all the things that you found, what's the most important thing? And he said, if you give me any criteria, emotional health, the well-being of the family, the well-being of the marriage, financially well off, longevity, every single one of them is connected to love. And he said, so the most important thing is love, full stop. And what he's talking about is being connected is the way we were designed to be. And it's good for us, and it's good for our health. And being connected is not what happens on a cell phone or on a social, on social media. What being connected means. I'm playing a game with you. I'm out bicycling with you. I'm on a hike with you. I'm on a horseback ride. We're going to a horse show together, whatever. But it means being connected and bonded and friends and caring about each other. And I think right now we've got this terribly impoverished notion of childhood. There's a wonderful experiment that was done by a guy named George Land for NASA. Okay, and NASA was worried about how are we going to find the scientists we need to help us with the exploration of space, decades from now. So Land came up with this test that looked for divergent genius thinkers. Okay, and they gave the test, and he decided, I'm going to take a look at kids. So he tested 1,600 4 and 5-year-olds. And 98% of them scored at the genius level for creative and divergent thinking. And by the time they finished high school, only 2% still qualified. And by the time they were 25 years old, there was 1%. And basically, Land came back and said, we're educating all of the creativity and genius out of our kids in the education system. We're just stamping it out. And I think, we have to be aware that those kids, when they were born, they knew music, they know art, they know dance, they know how to role play. Think about all the 2-year-olds who hold up the phone and start having a pretend conversation or play princess in front, while they're watching a Disney movie kind of thing. That's all part of childhood, and we're cutting off all those avenues of expression, and with them, the best thinkers that we're going to need for the next generation to help us with the problems that we're facing.
So you're talking, without knowing it, to a 64-year-old with a 7-year-old daughter who, is of course a genius. She's part of that 90, what was it?
98%.
98%. It's hard not to be, I guess.
You see it. You see it in front. You see her dancing. You see her moving. You see her swaying. You see her keeping the beat. I can tell you, I can look at her brain when she was 6 months old, and she can tell pitch. She can tell rhythm. She can tell beat. She can tell her brain is wired for music.
And and everything you said. So that's one of the most depressing statistic study I've heard in a while. The Harvard long-running study has a much nicer outcome. How do you fix that? What do you do What do you do to keep that creativity / genius? How do you keep that going and don't let the system suppress it?
Well, Sir Ken Robinson, who was a very famous educator who talked about how we kill off creativity, and he told this great story about this girl, I think in first grade, and she wasn't very involved in class at all, and they got to drawing, and they got put out drawing materials, and all of a sudden she's all bent over and her tongue sticking out of the corner of her mouth, and she's working very hard. And the teacher was just sort of intrigued, like she'd never been engaged like this before. So she walked over to the child and she said to the young lady, she said, "Oh my goodness, it's so nice to see you drawing. What are you drawing, honey?" And she said, "I'm drawing God." And teacher said, "Well, sweetie, nobody knows what God looks like." And she says, "Well, they will in a minute." And you think, boy, I don't want to kill off that kind of creativity and genius. I think we have to go back to some real basics. I think we have to realize as parents that electronics do not replace closeness and parenthood and sports and adventures together. And I think we have to realize that we've impoverished childhood, and it's particularly prevalent in the, on some of the, underserved populations, on Native American reservations, on inner cities. 1.3 million school children in elementary school go to a school that has absolutely zero art education. Zero.
Wow.
So we've got to retool, and we've got to retool and basically do it because it's the right thing to do.
Well, there's no more right thing to do, is there? I mean, there's no more important thing to do.
I couldn't agree with you more. You go, of all the things that I could do, investing in my grandchildren and their future is the most important thing I could do.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. There's this old Native American expression, which I love, which is, it says, when you do something, don't ask if it's good for you. Don't ask if it's good for your children. Don't ask if it's good for your grandchildren. Ask, is it good for 7 generations from now when they don't remember your name?
Wow.
And I think that's what we have to get back to. We have to get back to enjoying our national park system, which is immense and spectacular, as you know. And so much of it is unreachable without a horse. And it's just spectacular to get back there on horseback. And, we need to improve these programs so that kids who are in the inner city are having breaks where they get to go out to farms and ranches and forests and deserts and lakes and see and have that sense of awe of what creation really is.
Well, again, I think giving that person a sense of their place in the broader world, and I think that's more important than people understand. So I've got a little note here: World War I, changing the subject. Yeah. Story about grandfather and Otto the horse, Medal of Valor.
I love that story. I hope.
Oh, great, sure.
I hope I'm not violating a confidence by even bringing this up. I just loved that story.
Well, I did too as a kid. It was my grandfather was a cavalry officer in World War I. He had a wonderful horse named Otto, and in the 1916, so 2 years into the war, my grandmother was very worried something was going to happen to him. And he said, you don't have to worry about anything. Otto's going to take care of me. And his unit was charging over a hill and didn't know it. But on the other side of that hill, there was mortar emplacements. And as soon as the horses came over the top of the hill, they were hit with this mortar fire. And Otto did what he was trained to do, which is he reared up. And he took the full brunt of that detonation, and and fell to the ground. Legs blown off, and my grandfather was lying next to him. And at that time, they were told not to waste bullets on their horses. They were supposed to bayonet their horses to death, but of course, my grandfather couldn't do that. And later, he got the highest Medal of Valor. It was given to him by the Emperor Franz Joseph himself. And when I was a kid, I was always interested in that bright gold medal that was in the box. And every time I would go to open it, my grandfather would push the medal aside, and underneath it would be a picture of Otto. And he said, first off, Otto earned this medal, not me. And second of all, we all owe our lives. We are all here because of that horse.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, you can kind of see why that story got me, Russell.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you went to see the movie. Did you ever see the movie War Horse?
Yeah.
Yes.
Loved it.
Yeah. That movie, because my grandfather, I was like a basket case. I thought they were going to call 911 and have me carried out on a stretcher. My wife said she's never seen anybody go through so many Kleenex in one movie. She thought she was going to have to pull an alarm and break the case to get the second box of Kleenex. And I was just a basket case because I remember my grandfather, talking about it. And I remember we were in a museum once. There was one of these big battlefield paintings, these gigantic paintings showing the generals on their horses and everything. And my grandfather just went, he said, I hate these paintings. And he said, you know why? Because he said, there's nothing glorious about warfare. There's nothing, to paint about. There's nothing beautiful. There's nothing to be recorded. He said, what they can't bring you is the sound of the screaming horses. And he said, and that sound wakes me up in the middle of the night. And that was 50 years later. He was saying that.
Wow.
He said, the sound of the screaming horses on the battlefield is what woke him up at night.
It's remarkable.
Yeah. Horses have been with us the whole way, and they've sure served us. And people have rightfully said that civilization is paved on the bones of horses. So we have a huge debt of gratitude that we owe them.
And it strikes me in many cases that horses have been better to us than we've been to horses.
I would second that opinion. They have been much better friends to us than we have to them.
And you know, Doctor, I watch Russell when he'll be shoeing a horsehair, and it's amazing how compliant and nice that horse relates to Russell while he's doing it. And I've seen farriers do this, and it's not always that way, but it's been that way every time he does this. And I just think it's the manner in which he approaches them, and they know that he's there to help them.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I had a horse with the case of the strangles, you know, and I had to, every day I'd wrap his neck in warm towels, and every day I'd have to go and I'd have to lance these terrible pustules of lymph nodes on his neck. And I thought, there's no way he's ever going to let me cut these open to drain them. And he would stand stock still as if he could read my mind. And I said, this is the only way I can cure this. And it's the only way that you're going to be able to breathe. So I want you to hang in there with me. And he did for another 18 years.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I will say, as a sort of on that topic, but a digression, is that we've had with the number of horses we have a variety of problems, and sometimes some not so cooperative horses end up with an injury or illness that requires a very often a daily treatment. And you know, when they get to understand it. I mean, part of it's just desensitizing, but you know, you get to the other end and hopefully they're cured. And you know, the side benefit is they're easier and better to work with. But but we've stolen a lot of your time. We've loved it. Your latest book is Cerebral Entanglements, and the subtitle, How the Brain
Shapes Our Public and Private Lives.
I couldn't write.
And it's just written by thematic themes. There's laughter, music, grief, sadness, beauty, religion. Just goes topic by topic about how the brain works and how it manifests itself in our lives.
Because it's everything, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not written for scientists. It's written for, you know, regular people, lay people to read.
So Stephen and I can maybe get through and understand it?
Yeah, I think so. If you help each other, no.
A tiny brain folk like myself.
Absolutely.
We got the internet.
Get through it.
Well, thank you.
And I'll tell you what's more, there's a lot in there that'll resonate with you.
That's super. Well, I look forward to it, and it's available everywhere. We've already checked that out. Dr. Allan Hamilton, Cerebral Entanglements, written for those of us who aren't scientifically, well, actually, Miss Dr. Clausen here can understand a lot more than plain old Russell. But
I don't know about all that.
But thank you so much, and it's fun to talk to you after at the Tankerverde Ranch, your good friend and my good friend Bob Coates' ranch. You gave such a great speech that it stuck with my feeble memory, and thanks for taking the time with us today.
Yeah, I miss Bob. He's a wonderful man. Wonderful man.
Yeah, he really was. But he left a legacy, and he
did.
He did. Bob did things his way, and he did it well, and just really left the world better than he found it. So that's all any of us can ask, right?
Yep, he done good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
You bet.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and thank you very much for being a part of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. We'd like to hear from you. Perhaps you'd like to raise your hand and tell us about somebody who would be a great guest. maybe you'd like to audition yourself to be a guest because you've got some stories to tell, and some, just like the good doctor, you've got things that could be helpful and useful to others. So why don't you reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. And we'll see if we can find a place for you, and we'd love to hear more from you about the show and how we can do a better job of entertaining you every week, and how perhaps it might be helpful to you and your business. Remember, we come your way from the White Stallion Historic Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. It's a place unto itself, and you need to find out more about it. We're waiting this summer and early fall right now. It'll be a little bit warmer in the Arizona climate, but still a number of people find that just perfect for the kind of recreation and the kind of riding and laying by the pool that they want to do. So why don't you check us out at whitestallion.com. That's whitestallion.com. We look forward to meeting you and perhaps inviting you to be on the Cowboy Up Podcast. Hey, all the best, and remember, stand tall, do good work, ride safe, tip your hat, be good to others, do a little blessing from time to time. That's the Cowboy way. Bye for now.